If you're enjoying this episode of the Forest School podcast, we want to ask you to consider supporting us on Patreon. Your contributions help us to cover production costs, bring on amazing guests, and create more of this amazing content that you guys are loving. Visit our Patreon page today at patreon.com/the Forest School podcast and join us with your support. Thank you so much. I don't know if you know this, but I, Lewis Ames, can sometimes be a little bit argumentative, a little bit confrontational. And in the summer of 2020, there was a lockdown and there was nobody to argue with, nobody for me to be confrontational with, face-to-face. Obviously, all the online stuff was kicking off, but face-to-face, I couldn't be confrontational. And so I chose to be productive with that confrontation, that pushback energy that I have. And so I wrote the book, The Myths of Outdoor Play and Learning. And what I did was I took the 11 most common things that I heard that were pushback from head teachers, that were pushback from parents, or that were pushback from maybe newer leaders who had these kind of confrontational ideas that I didn't agree with. And I wrote 11 chapters in the book in this conversational style where I just typed my here's why. Maybe I thought this would be helpful to some people. And to my surprise, it is. People love it. People have been writing. It's got 5-star reviews on Amazon and everything. It is a book that has helped people. So many people who are like, I've used this with my head teacher to argue the case for this. I've used this with parents to kind of challenge this belief that was making my group a little bit sticky. I've used this to cement my own thoughts about outdoor play and learning and the things that need to happen in that space. So if you want to check it out, you can Google Myths of Outdoor Play and Learning by Lewis Ames. You'll find that book. If you'd like to read a good argument, then I would suggest giving it a go. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to the Forest School podcast. I'm Lewis Ames. On my own today. No, Wem is taking a little bit of a break from the podcast. She has some health stuff that Wem is, working on at the moment, which means Wem will be in as many episodes as she can, but it might be a couple where it's just me and a guest. So that's where we are today. On today's episode, we're going to be looking at 10 ways that you can learn the bushcraft skills associated with Forest School way faster than I did. I've been reflecting. We're getting close to 200 episodes, and I went back and I looked and I thought, what do I know now, nearly a decade on, that I wish I'd known when I started my training all those years ago. So I'm going to go through 10 ways that you can learn faster than I ever did. But before we get into that, I want to respond. We've had another email come in from a listener off our last episode, our last Unconventional Essentials episode, about mud kitchens. So we've got an email here from Sarah in Bristol. It says, hey, love the episode on mud kitchens. As winter is approaching, I'm wondering how to keep the kids engaged with this kind of outdoor play in the colder months. What materials are safe and fun to use when it's chilly, and how can I encourage them to keep playing with the mud kitchen despite it being cold outside? Any tips would be greatly appreciated. So first of all, Sarah, thanks for sending us that message. People, if you're listening and you want to send us a message, you can head to theforestschoolpodcast.com. You can either leave us a voice note or you can send us a text message. So I was thinking about Sarah's message and thinking about yeah, you're right. Mud kitchens do kind of go through this kind of change as it gets into the winter months. Partly there's a sensory element to this thing that changes in terms of how does it feel to be tactile with mud? There's also this consideration, I think, that we need to be aware of, how long are your sessions? So Wem and I are often out in the woods for 6-7 hour days. If your hands start to get cold because you're playing with mud right first thing in the morning, that can really impact on a longer session, as opposed to if you run maybe 90-minute sessions or 2-hour sessions, then maybe you've got a bit more leeway for okay, you want to do this play so much, let's go for it. We will navigate you being a little bit uncomfortable afterwards, but on balance, this is the whole thing. But thinking about how do you keep that kind of enthusiasm going for mud kitchens as we get into the winter. And one of the biggest things that I think I would kind of advocate for is, while they are called mud kitchens, and obviously there's huge benefits that come with working with mud as a like malleable substance and all these things. I think we can, taking this kind of thought on board, we can kind of broaden it out to like loose parts kitchen. So reflecting on like what have I seen, but also what have I facilitated. I think one of the biggest things that you can do as you move into the winter is switching out some of the resources or that are available in your mud kitchen, and adding in as many loose parts as you can. And now that's where you're kind of adding in like wood cookies, you're adding in maybe conkers, acorns, pine cones. I know some of those are harder to get hold of in the winter, but maybe then it's pebbles. It can be like beads and things like that, anything you're comfortable having in your setting that's not going to detriment, the woodland. You don't want to be including like, I mean, maybe you do. I was going to say things like bottle tops and things like that might be considered like litter if they moved away from the mud kitchen. But thinking about those kind of small resources like gravels and pebbles and acorns and pine cones that can still allow all of those things of like pouring and manipulating and stacking and combining, but they are accessible even when you're wearing these like maybe mittens or huge thick gloves, or we're still facilitating that kind of like mastery play, but also trying to take into account like what kind of layers are people wearing in the winter. Do they have the same dexterity? Do they have like the same mobility in their body? And do they want the sensory experience of mud? Well, maybe they still want the sensory experience of like preparing and bringing and mastery play and all those things, but mud is not the resource anymore. And so thinking about those kind of loose parts, those things, I mean, sand is probably the smallest you could get as you go down that like pebble gravel continuum, but I think sand has its own issues in winter, so I'd probably steer clear of sand. But yeah, Sarah, as you're looking towards the winter, thinking about stockpiling, go full squirrel mode, go a little bit feral, go hoardery, get them conkers, get the acorns, go out to like, okay, you haven't heard me say this, but like go to like National Trust properties, go to like places like that and just fucking fill up bags. Yeah, that would be my thing. Sarah, thank you so much for your message. Guys, if there's anything you hear in the podcast you want to ask, my advice, Wem's advice, everybody's advice, then send us a message, theforestschoolpodcast.com. You can send us voice notes, you can send us text messages. And if you're enjoying the podcast and you want to head over to patreon.com/the Forest School Podcast, we're putting loads more stuff up there, like extra resources that are coming out, kind of like guides and reflective practices that I'm kind of going, oh, we did the podcast on mud kitchens. This week on Patreon, I've just put up 3 reflective questions through the week for practitioners to kind of engage with and go like, yeah, how do we assess the mud kitchen? What's your mud kitchen doing? So this week, there'll be a couple of resources going up about like reflecting and engaging on your bushcraft skills. And so if you're thinking that, one, you want to support the podcast, love you, thank you so much. But also if you're thinking like, oh, I'd love like a continuous practice thing that gets me reflecting a little bit more, asks me some kind of questions about my practice, then head to patreon.com/the Forest School Podcast. It's all over there. We would really love to see you there. Now, into today's show, 10 things. I'm going to go through mistakes I made. I'm going to go through things that I think you should be bearing in mind. And I'm going to be going through like what I would do now to be doing those things. Because sometimes you look back and you kind of go, yeah, I got there. Especially if you've got maybe a slightly wonky brain. You go, yeah, I got there. But now that I'm here, I can see a way easier path that I could have come. So having a bit of a reflect, we're approaching 200 episodes. Let's pull up my notes and have a little look through. So, number one, most challenging one this would have been for me, but I wanted to put it at the start because I think it is one of the most important things. Yo, it's an advert. It's an advert for my book. Which book? It's the cooking book. It's the book of cooking. The book of not just cooking, the book of cooking and ovens. It's called Forest School Cooking. You can find it on Amazon. It's something I'm so proud of. First half of the book is all different ovens. I got bored of doing stuff on campfires, especially when sometimes people would come in, and genuinely had someone come to one of our toddler groups who went, oh, what are we deep frying today? And I went, shit. So it has all the different ways that you can build both temporary and semi-permanent ovens, things like rocket stoves, things like pizza ovens. That is all in the front half of the book. Back half of the book is all recipes that you can use that are like communal recipes, things that take it on. If you want to do cooking, I think there should be an element of like cooking is communal and cooking is like sustenance. You know, this idea that like, oh, campfire cooking is trivial. That's where we do snacks. That's where we do like bits. We do popcorn and marshmallows, but it's never actually a thing. If you want to connect in that reciprocal, nope, that's not the word. What's the word? Oh no, recapitulative play. That's the one. Recapitulative play. You want to play out your ancestry, right? You want to go and see like, this is how, you know, survival things, or this is kind of like how people commune around the world. Cook a meal. Cook a big meal, a hearty meal. That's what the second half of the book is. Hearty, cheap meals that you can cook over a campfire that are like filling. They're not super like sugar based and like just heavy. They're different things, all different levels. Some of them are more complex cooks that might take, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes to get ready and a little bit longer to bake. Some of them are super quick. You can prep it at home, bring it to the woods, knock it up. If you want to, head to Forest School. Head to Amazon. It's on Amazon. Forest School Cooking. It's a great book. Honestly, it will change your practice and change your cooking forever. My number one tip, that like hack that will get you learning faster than I did, sharing humility. Now, the mistake retrospectively that I made when I went into Forest School was thinking that it was still a top-down pedagogy, that it was still a like, yeah, it's outdoors, yeah, it's kind of play-based, but I still need to be in the role of expert 95% of the time. And actually, I think that held me back a huge amount. Obviously, there were some benefits there in terms of like that kind of impostery syndrome stuff making me go like, oh, I'm going to practice loads more because I don't want to look silly. But actually, in the long run, it didn't help me because I was doing everything under like stress and duress rather than like freely enjoying it. So sharing some humility, even if you're starting out, being honest about like where you are with your skill set development in a particular area, going, do you know what, guys? I really want to do some knot work today because knots are something I've only just learned. I did some training on it last week and I really want to practice this thing. Maybe you guys can help me out. Maybe this thing can do. And like, that's way better modeling than this kind of top down, like, I'll show you how to do it and then I'll come around and, you know, check on how you're doing, knowing full well that I didn't know exactly how they were doing and I didn't have the expertise to, you know, go and help them out. So I couldn't really advise when things were going wrong and I had to sort of blag it. So many mistakes. So number one thing that I would try and hold as you're like going through thinking about your bushcraft skills, maybe you've just done your practical training with someone, hopefully face to face, please face to face, and you've kind of come away and you're like, right, I'm going to go run my 6 pilot sessions, and you've maybe got this mindset going in that like you need to be the one that like always does the tarps, or you need to be there like showing some kind of tangible, like, well, no one could do a clove hitch at the beginning of the session and now they all can. Like, that's not where I would advise being. You will learn so much faster if you get everybody involved. So not only is it better for the participant, but it's also better for you because you are open to seeing different ways of doing that thing, whether they come from a 7-year-old or, you know, a parent or a volunteer or somebody else that's with you. Going in with that humility, I think, would have been the number one thing for my own personal growth. I could have learned from so many more people than I did because I was stuck in this mindset of leader hierarchy. And now looking back, I can see that there were volunteers, there were parents, there were other people that I really should have reached out to. I really should have kind of gone, hey, I know I'm holding up this thing, but actually there's this area that I could do with some support in. I noticed you are particularly skilled at that. Any chance you could pass me on? And not feeling like, oh, I can't charge people for a session if I don't know all the knots. Of course you can. No one's sending you there explicitly because they think, oh, that guy knows all the knots. That's the only reason I'm sending my kid. You're space holding. You're doing all these things. You're providing resources. You're providing childcare. You're, you know, facilitating peer mediations, all those things, right? The bushcraft side of it stuff is lovely, but individually, not one of those things is a reason that people are or aren't booking with you. So have the humility, take that on board, and learn from as many people as you can. Hack number two. Hack number two is creating. Now it's kind of linked. It's this culture of continuous learning. Lots of the pedagogy in forest school talks about this culture of continuous learning, but keeping that alive and extending it like beyond the woods. So setting yourself like mini challenges, setting yourself like little things that you can go and do. And I've got some examples later on, but having this kind of thing that, you know, forest school, because it's a holistic pedagogy, has this stuff baked in that is like, it's not stuff that you learn just at forest school and then we shut the door or close the gate and then we don't think about it anymore. Trying to integrate and like blur those lines between like, hey, if there's a skill you want to practice, how many other places are there that you can practice that skill? Can you tie your shoelaces in a weird way? Could you, you know, like light the campfire in your garden for a couple of evenings? Not for any particular purpose, but like that's maybe where you want to practice it. So you're not confining your own practice to like, I practice this at the sessions, or even I practice this on my practical days of training and nowhere else, or like this is something I can only do right before the session starts, you know? So there are lots of things that I learned to do, but I only gave myself the time to do it during setup or during pack down, mostly during setup. Things that I could have learned, you know, like firelighting, knot work, maybe a bit of knife skills, where like the only time I gave myself to practice it was right before a session started, where I was going, oh crud, I better check I can still whittle a tent peg. Yeah, okay. And you're doing it under such duress that it's not helpful in the long run. Spreading these things out so that they are embedded in your life, so that you can kind of go like, oh yeah, it's the bit there and a bit there and a bit there, is way more helpful, I find, for my long-term memory than just like, you know, this is my dedicated practice time and nowhere else. Maybe that's just how my particularly wonky brain works, but I think that that could be helpful for more people going forwards. So now we're on to some full practical skills. You ready for some ASMR? Because I'm going to open some kombucha. Ooh, fizzy. So I want to talk about firelighting. Now, when I did my practical training, I've been very honest in the past and said that my practical training was the training that I did was very conveyor belt. And what I mean by that is that the course that I was on felt very like, here's the thing, I've shown it to you, you had 10 minutes to do it, now we move on. Next week. Here's the thing, I've shown you how to do it, 10 minutes to practice, move on. The time for embedding it just wasn't there. But with firelighting, one of the things that really struck me was there's a parallel between firelighting and what I used to find when I did a music degree. So I did a lot of performances, and anyone that's done performances and learned a particular piece, some of the pieces that you learn, particularly in like classical music, can be quite long, and it can be very tempting. I promise this metaphor will make sense in a minute. You can end up with pieces, and I know I had pieces of music like this, where I could play the first 6 bars so unbelievably well, and there was like a linear line from great downwards as the piece went on, because I didn't know about segmenting out the practice. And so what I would do is every time I wanted to practice, I would start at bar 1 and I would go, okay, maybe I got to bar 8 confidently. Okay, let me check out bar 9. Right, back to the start. Right, that's the one that I'm doing. And so what that meant is bars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're getting so much repetition, so much practice that as you go further in the piece, it's just less and less time that I've practiced it. And that's kind of how I feel about my firelighting learning. I spent so long practicing the like sparking, practicing the like fluffing up the cotton wool, practicing the, you know, doing whatever else involved in, you know, that initial starting, right? But as someone that is now running long-term sessions and running sessions that run for a few hours, most and more importantly, that I've run this training, you know, for a few years now, people end up in that same situation where they are pretty good at sparking a ferro rod. They are pretty good at fluffing up some cotton wool. They are quite often the least practiced at keeping a fire going. And that's actually the skill that you need for 80% of the session. Like, you need to, in an ideal situation, you spark it once, then you've got 90 minutes of keeping that going, or however long you need that fire on for. And the amount of times that I see people stuff their fires up or create smoky fires or do things, because that's the bit they've practiced the least. They've practiced the lighting over and over and over and over again. And so that's great. And especially then it compounds, because if you don't practice keeping a fire going, then those fires go out. And so what do? You spark them up again. And so you go from bar 1 again, and you're going through and through and through, and then the fire goes out because you haven't practiced keeping it going. So the hack that I'm going to give you here is to start backwards with everything that you can to help you out, and then move back. So, and what I mean by that is, when you're lighting fires for a while, I would absolutely encourage you to use all or any of these things: cotton wool, Vaseline, wood wool firelighters. Look, maybe they're not the best in the world for long-term use, but chemical firelighters. I would encourage you to be using like those pre-made bricks of newspaper, those things that like keep your fire going very easily. And get practiced at the last bit. Get practiced at keeping a fire going and doing all that stuff. So using all those tools means that we're just making the first bit easier, because we want to practice. I think it's more beneficial to practice keeping that fire going, then move slowly backwards. So now maybe you're still using cotton wool, wood wool, and all those other bits, but maybe now you're using like kindling that you have cut. Do you know what I mean? So you're there and you're taking a bit and you're just moving, rather than from the front forwards, rather than from bar 1 and starting there every time. We'll be starting with like the prep of keeping a fire going. So you're great at keeping a fire going. Okay, give yourself a tiny bit more challenge today. So you can still use the ferro rod, you can still use the cotton wool, you can still use like Vaseline, but maybe you don't use a wood wool lighter today. And you try that and you work backwards until you get to just a ferro rod and some curled up birch bark, and you light the fire that way. I think that's a way more successful way to practice that fire lighting skill than just starting at bar 1, striking a cotton wool, and then it goes. Okay, strike the cotton wool, there it goes. I think starting at the end and working backwards would have made my fire lighting experience not only more successful, but way more fun, because I would have been not so worried about it during the sessions. The amount of emotional stress that I've gone through in sessions trying to keep fires going so that I can get enough hot water for hot chocolate, or I told everybody I'd cook pancakes, or all those things. And the reason that I was panicking is because that's the bit I hadn't practiced. I wasn't good at keeping a fire going or controlling how big and small it was. I was great. I was absolutely great at doing sparks onto cotton wool, but that's not what the skill was that I needed. So number three hack is going to be starting your fire backwards. Prep from a lit fire backwards. Hack number 4, knot tying. Now, knots are something that different people learn in different ways. I've worked with some people in the past who feel really comfortable in a like conceptual way. Once they know how the knot works, bang, that kind of clicks for them. There's some people that need to visually see it. There's some people that prefer, that they need that kind of description of like, the working end and things going round and all those things. For me, muscle memory. It's muscle memory. Once I've got the muscle memory, then I start to see the knot working and then I understand it. So the hack that I'm going to suggest is a hack that maybe some other people have come up with accidentally, but I would encourage you to get maybe, how long is this? A foot, maybe a little bit more of paracord. Now this is important, very brightly coloured paracord, because you don't want to lose this. And put it in a pocket. We're going to add this to your checklist of keys, phone, wallet, paracord. I'm going to put that paracord in there. And what I wish I had done now is take Post-it notes. Now I've got some here that these are like mini-sized ones. They're kind of, 2.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. And I wish I had encouraged my partner or whoever I was living with to stick those up with maybe like 5 different knots, right? So write 5 different knots on those Post-it notes and stick them all over the house, wherever it is that I'm going to encounter them. And set those up during the day so that when I open the fridge and there's a little post-it note on the hummus that says bowling. And I go, okay. Pull out the paracord, have a go at some bowlings. Done. Great. Okay, maybe I'm going down there. Oh, in my shoe, there's a post-it note that says clove hitch. Yeah, make an E, then an E. Done. Bang, clove hitch. And practicing those things, because that is how using knots works in a session, in the bushcraft sense, is like you use them as you need them, and then you move on. The skill is being able to recall them, not in a sense of like, I don't know any bushcraft scenario really, other than kind of prepping paracord or prepping, sinnets, if you want to prep your paracord altogether. It's very rare that you sit and do loads and loads and loads of knot work. Bracelets, maybe, but actually, in a practical sense, it's kind of like, I need to tie this up. I'm going to do one knot, then it's done. Then I'm moving around. Someone says, oh, can you help me with the shoes? Yep. Do the knot, moving on, do the 10 minutes. So I was trying to replicate that thing of being able to go, okay, how can I just pull this up? It's low stakes. Nobody's watching me because it's post-it notes. I think I would feel very differently if I'd asked someone to jump out from behind corners and go, show me a double dragon loop now. That would stress me out and I wouldn't enjoy that. But the post-it notes are non-judgmental. They can't see if I get it right or wrong. And I would just collect them and then give them back to whoever it was and then say, could you just stick these up somewhere else? And I think doing lots of very small scale knot work is a hack that I wish I had used to get my brain prepped earlier on. So as I said earlier, that culture of continuous learning, but through little challenges through the day. Hack number 6. Now, in terms of tree ID, obviously, I personally am going to advocate. I'm going to show you my hands right now. People listening will have to just go with me. My hands have leaves tattooed on them. On each of my fingers, I have different leaves tattooed. So hack number 6 is get leaves tattooed on your... No, don't. That's silly. But I want... if I was thinking about learning the trees again, I would be, again, breaking it down. So many people that I've worked with, you start talking about tree ID, you start opening things. And because you're not often working with someone who has known nature in that kind of way for a very long time, it can be quite off-putting. We go on a walk maybe, and I can name more than a handful of mushrooms. And then you might go, okay, I'm going to look up some stuff about mushrooms. And you buy a book. And now to try and be helpful, that book lists 400 types of mushrooms. And they're often kind of hard to pick through and all those things. And so that can be really overwhelming. I would recommend taking a smaller scale approach. I have seen, actually, it was the always informative Lily Horseman on her training was saying that she gives people some flora and fauna, like 3 or 4 things, that's their flora and fauna to look out for the year. Maybe someone's looking out for owls, someone's looking out for lizards, someone's, breaking it down into like, not just like go learn about nature. It's too big. No one's ever done it all, right? The idea that that's going to happen is silly. But in terms of tree IDing, I would be taking a handful. For me personally, I don't think I could handle more than 3. And I take 3 bits of flora and I maybe write them down or, print out a little thing of those leaves. And then I would go for a walk and try and just spot those 3. Not anything else. Quick check, is it one of those 3? If it isn't, I just move on. I don't spend time going like, I'm going to try and identify every tree in my park, or I'm going to try and identify. I just want to go those 3. And again, build that skill of like quickly recalling, like, right, off we go. Finding that, finding the next one. And then if I was pretty confident I've got those 3, this is where I think you've got a choice. You can either keep those 3 and add a 4th, or you can choose a whole new 3. Depends how your brain works. Some people really enjoy going, right, those 3 are consolidated, give me a new 3. Some people I know, if they reflect honestly, are kind of like, if I stop looking for those 3, I'm going to lose them. I'll know the new 3, but I won't know those first 3. So hack number 6, just breaking it down into like a few bits of flora, or fungi or whatever it is that you want to go and identify, and just looking for those. Break the whole thing down, and they will start to, it's almost like one of those magic eye pictures where the things start to like slowly come into view. Suddenly it looks like what would have looked like just a sea of green starts to look like a sea of green and those 2 trees that you can pick out. That's great. Don't worry about the sea of green. That's great that you've got those 2 or 3. So that's hack number 6, breaking it down. Now, number 7, we'll talk about knife skills. There are countless knife projects. So many knife projects that you can do, from the very dry kind of like try sticks, which some people may have seen, which is just a stick and it has an example of about between 5 and 10 different cut types on it, push cuts, V cuts, all those things. And you just make try sticks over and over and over again. And if that works for you, great. Some people like doing bigger and bigger practical projects. They like doing spoons and then seeing if they can do a slotted spoon and then seeing if they can do a thing. I personally, that did not work for me. And I think that is what I tried to do. Initially, I think on my training, we were encouraged to make spoons. And spoons are like notoriously a thing that is very difficult. And also it's an object that we see every day. So in the same way that when you see a drawing of a face, your brain is very good at knowing what's not quite right about it. Seeing a spoon was just unachievable, because for me, the spoon was so familiar as an object that anything I whittled was never going to, reach the same kind of thing. So instead, I want to encourage you into what I wish I had done. And I kind of did, but I didn't know about it. And so I wish I had done it more intentionally, which is to pick one project. And the project that I'm going to suggest that you pick to like hack your knife skills, hack your tool work, axes, saws, whittling knives. The project that I'm going to suggest is mallets. Now, most people will come away from their level 3 training or any kind of outdoor training with a mallet, because they're great. Because a mallet involves sawing, it involves splitting, it involves carving, and also they're such a practical tool that they're great. The downside of mallets, if you're unaware of it, is that a mallet can last years. Like, I have mallets. We have a mallet called the Holly Hammer, which now is less mallet and more kind of log on the ground, I'll be honest, but I do sometimes still use it as a mallet. And one of the things that I think is a downside to mallets lasting a long time is that you don't make them again. Or many people don't. They make one on their training, they take that to their site, they go, this is my one for putting tent pegs in, this is my one for putting hammering in things at the beach. What are they called? Windbreaks. That's the thing. And so you can end up making this incredible project once and not learning from the skills in the same way that is possible. I'm going to encourage, as this hack, that you make mallets over and over and over and over again. I want to see, if it was me, for this hack, I would make them out of holly, I would make them out of beech, I would make them out of oak, I'd make them out of greenwood, I'd make them out of deadwood, I'd make them out of anything I can find. Because they're short as a project, and because they are functional in a very quick amount of time, they sit in a different way than spoons, for me, or other kind of projects like tent pegs, like things like that. Tent pegs, I don't feel like they're too short as a project. It just doesn't quite last long enough. Whereas a mallet, I feel like, is the perfect amount of time to really engage with each of those tools before you move on to the next thing. So I think what we're learning, as I said, they involve axes, they involve knives, they involve whittling, they involve saws. Now, what I'm also learning about that is not just familiarity with those tools, but by making a whole range of them, you're learning about the different choices of wood you can make. You're learning to assess the wood by a particular criteria, not by like, hey, how do you feel about that as carving wood? How do you feel about that? You're like, as a mallet, how do you feel about that piece of wood? Where are the knots? Great. You're starting to identify where knots are. How hard do you think that wood's going to be? Is the grain going to be twisted? Is it going to flake away? The idea that you're building up this kind of knowledge base through mallets is one of the things that I think like it is game changing about having all those mallets. And it's a shame that they last so long and people often miss this opportunity. So, oh God, I've forgotten which number we're on. Number 7, mallets. That's hack number 7. Just keep making mallets in many different ways. Long ones, short ones, big ones, small ones. Ones with, I've started making mallets now with a little pommel on the end that sits under my hand. Try chaining them with curvy. Anyway, you get the point. I think mallets are the thing to make over and over and over again to up your knife game and your tool game in general at a speed that I wish I'd been able to get to. Okay. Hack number 8, and this kind of like ties in to this thing about mallets, is like, as much as possible, making these skill practices tangible, making them to do with like building projects on your site. Now, I know some people will have permanent sites and some people will be working on like sites that are temporary. They're pack in, pack out. But if you're pack in, pack out, and you can get faster and faster at box slashing because you put up a swing, not just a swing by throwing it over a branch. That's one way of doing it, and there is skill learning there. But if you can take on slightly more of a challenge and do like box slashing every week when you set up and undo it when you pack down, the undoing, oh my God, tangent. Nothing will get you as good at quick deploy and quick release knots as working on pack in and pack out sessions. Because if you are packing up on a Friday afternoon and it's raining and it's windy and you've kind of just about got through the session on the skin of your teeth, the joy that comes from having found those like Bushcraft videos where they're like, here's my quick deploy tarp, here's the quick release box, quick release bowline or something like that, where you can just go around, yank on a bit of cord and the whole thing goes and undoes. If you're someone who's pack in, pack out already and you're not looking at quick release and quick deploy methods, go and look them up because they will absolutely change your whole practice. And those knots are in some ways so much more interesting to kind of look at and learn from. So I'd really, really recommend making these projects kind of like practical, tangible, and assessing, like keeping a little bit of a record of it over time. You know, how long does it take you to set up for a session? How are your mallets, looking? There's something about like, clearly, I think through this, I've demonstrated that I'm a big believer in practical skills being done for a real purpose, or spread out through a like replicable day rather than discrete, go and spend a day doing it and then never do it again. So yeah, making those skills kind of like built in. Hack number 9, I'm going to say peer learning and demonstrations. Now, there are so many opportunities near me that I wish I had gone to more of them, in terms of more and more people now, it seems. I'm recording this in 2024, and more people are becoming open with the idea of just offering skill shares or offering like we said about hack number 1, about not necessarily having to be the expert about it. And I wish that I had gone to more of those local meetups, to more of the local kind of like, just like knife work days or skill refresher things. I think those have a huge benefit of learning from, even if you end up learning the whole thing that you already know over and over again. Let's say you've done like, let me get my thoughts together. If you are someone who's come away from your practical training and you genuinely are like, I know the way to do whittling because that's what was on my course, then I think you're at a disadvantage compared to somebody who, they did their level 3 practical course. Then they went and did a knife day with someone else. It was exactly the same skills, but they heard a different person phrase it. They heard a different person kind of demonstrate why they do different things. If someone's gone to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a handful of teachers, and learnt the same thing over and over again, I do think that is a hack that you can use rather than just going, I will do what that one teacher said over and over and over and over again. Because I had a teacher at school who used to say, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. What he meant by that was like, if you are practicing something that is not necessarily ideal, but you practice it over and over and over again, you're just making that technique permanent in your muscle memory. So having this kind of broad strokes approach to, something like knife work, it is an invaluable thing. And I wish I had had more humility to go to those things and not necessarily be like, I've done my level 3, so I don't need to go on any knife days unless it's an expert day. Oh, I don't need to go on any Skillshare things because I know how to run it. That's probably for people that don't know the things that I know. Go anyway. If you've got the time and they're not too expensive, go anyway, because you will find something. And that is a hack that we should be doing, I think, as much as we can, not just at the start, but all the way through, to kind of go to these conferences, go to these meetups with a not necessarily a like top-down approach that we all know doesn't work, because that's why we're in forest school and in alternative education, but to kind of look at it and go, where can I go and just spend some time with some people and learn different ways of doing this same thing? And now we reach our last hack, a hack that I have held right to the end. These hacks are in no particular order other than the first couple. Number 10 is like reflecting and reviewing on your skills. I take great joy in things like that automatically remind me, Google Photos or Facebook Memories, things like that a lot of them are cringe from when they're showing me things from like 10, 15 years ago that are on my Facebook, and I want to be like, oh, no, get rid of that. But there are some things that are useful, like when it comes up and it shows me like a photo and it's captioned setting up for my sessions today, and I look at the tarp and I go, holy shit, that's awful, Lewis. What are you doing? It was so interesting to reflect on those at different points and really give yourself some credit for the journey that you're going on. Sometimes that can be just photographing different things that you do. Sometimes that can be checking in with different people and going like, hey, do you remember we used to do that? Hey, how are we feeling about that? Because that doesn't feel like something I'm pushing on anymore. It feels like it's, natural. And again, other examples, like visual examples. So this is where I really love the mallet hack, because mallets are great because they're a great thing that different people need different size tools, different shape tools. And so it's valuable to have a collection of mallets. And also it's so super valuable. We have ours hung up on a little rack with screws, like coat hooks. And there's maybe between 12 and 15 mallets, different sizes, different shapes, different woods. And not only is it a reflection for me, every time I choose a mallet and I think, oh, I remember when I made that one. I remember when that one, I started making that. I remember when I thought it was going to be a good idea to make one this big and I never use it. And it's there. And that's just having those things to hand to reflect on is so beneficial, not just for your own reflections, but for the modeling that you can do through those reflections to people around you. I'd be like, yeah, just hold this mallet because this is one I thought was going to be good. Or do you know what? This one, I've got a mallet that's made of eucalyptus and oh my God, I love it. Not only is like the eucalyptus wood glorious, but it's a really good mallet and it didn't take me very long at all. So that's a mallet that I can hold up and be like, look, this is a mallet I can make. This is like, here's my little progression. Here's my scrapbook. So thinking about like, how are there ways that you can keep a scrapbook of your own skills going, reflecting, celebrating yourself, keeping those things going. I wish I had done that more early on because I just spent a long time just beating myself up, just watching like YouTube videos of bushcraft people and going and seeing a more extreme way of doing something. Oh, you can light fire with your toenails. Oh, you can get a knife so sharp that it can, it can actually cut tension. If anything's, stuff like that. Where it's like, there's so many experts in the world and you can beat yourself up without realizing the progress you've made. So thinking about how you can reflect, how you can review, genuinely, I think, is one of the hacks I wish I had done to make my progress that much faster. Guys, thank you for joining me. That's just been a very cathartic episode for me to look back and look back at something that I was way too big-headed about right at the start of my journey, and something I am so glad that things have kind of moved on, and there are so many more experts and peers and people that I can go to and chat to about these things. If you are just starting your training, I hope that these tips and hacks will be helpful for you as you're going forwards. Please do, as I said at the start, drop me a message, forestschoolpodcast.com. Head to patreon.com/Forest School Podcast if you want to get involved in, reviewing and reflecting on our practices and kind of growing together in this kind of peer community kind of way. And if not, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time. Stay wonky. Keeping the Forest School podcast running takes a lot of work, and we need your help to make it sustainable. By supporting us on patreon.com/the Forest School podcast, you're directly contributing to the future of this podcast. If you're enjoying our episodes, please consider becoming a member today at patreon.com/the Forest School podcast.